Hi, Wallis.
Hi, Michelle.
Welcome, listeners, to the Talt House. Happy to be in your ear holes. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is our third and final episode on just a little experimental project.
You're hearing us workshop in real time.
Yes.
Well, not totally workshop, but
working through some things that were not quite totally worked through, you know?
Yes. And we're bringing you into that process. And we don't have a fully formed thesis on this question of, is wellness dead? Was wellness a pseudo event? But it's something that we've been thinking about for a long time and wrestling with. And we thought that because we had some wonderful interviews and we've spent a lot of time thinking about this and researching this, that it would be better to let you in on the whole process of it all, even if it's not perfect, because actually, as you say, Michelle, people want
your magic, not your perfection. And today our magic is going to be a little bit messy, but that's okay. I think it's good. I actually always like hearing someone sort of wrestle with a thought process and not just be stuck on one side. So we're going to present where we're at, and you, dear listener, can follow along. And I'd love to hear where you end up, what you think at the end of all of this, and maybe what keeps percolating for you. But our journey begins in November of last year when I was visiting a friend who lives in West Hollywood, and I saw that Moon Juice on Melrose Place was closing down. And I was like, what is happening? Because Moon Juice Melrose Place was like a to-do. Do you remember when it opened a couple years ago?
Yeah, because I remember that the Glossier opened not too long after.
Yes.
And then it was like a thing, if you were going to go there, not that much clothing.
No.
But there was like
a plethora of beverages. There's like Alfred coffee, Alfred tea, Moon Juice. Yeah. Lots of bloggers, lots of seen be seen. Violet Gray used to be over there too. But it felt like a big deal that Moon Juice was closing there because that company has been such an almost beacon in the wellness world, or canary in the wellness coal mine. Especially representational of like almost out of touch wellness and wealth in a way.
Aspirational.
Exactly. So I asked the team who worked there, the dusters, if you will. It's like, what's going on here? How come you guys are closing? And they said because of the pandemic, there just hasn't been enough foot traffic and it doesn't make sense to have the location anymore. So we're getting rid of it. And I'm not going to lie to you. I was like a little alarmed because that's not a good sign for a big company like that.
No. And that was 2021 that they closed?
Yeah. Or at the very end of 2021, like maybe early 2022.
Yeah. The beginning of the end, perhaps. And also, I think it was at the same time that they were kind of changing some of what they were doing. They weren't making as many juices in the stores. They were pivoting to, I think, making more shakes, lattes in store. They had just released that new cookbook that seemed like, oh, this is a departure from the first cookbook that they released.
Yeah. Their first cookbook was this like gorgeous, mystical, sort of like totally aspirational, almost out of touch, and like
it's kind of like an art book.
It really was. It was like, do you have all these crazy ingredients that are going to make the $600 smoothie? And it's like, no, but I would love to flip through watching you make it on your copper counters. That sounds amazing. And their new cookbook is like super affordable. It's like talks a lot more about how to make a lot of these things at home and how to make, supplementation for them. And just, it's way more accessible. And Moon Juice, kind of the brand had always been inaccessible in a way, That was like part of its, not charm. Charm is not the word, but like part of its brand.
Hence the name, Moon Juice.
Exactly. And this kind of like sent us both down this spiral of thinking or asking like, okay, is this just a one-off thing, or does this represent a bigger shift in the wellness world, in the wellness industry? And I think that, coupled with people asking us, what do you do? What is holisticism? I had a personal sort of existential crisis of like, do I even want to like associate myself with wellness anymore, or us with wellness anymore? Because I don't really feel like I fit in with any of these wellness people necessarily. A lot of the wellness people.
And I think even still a little bit less so, but when you say that word, it conjures something for people. It conjures an archetype that I think is still often associated with Goop.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because there's obviously so much more than that, and people who have been working in so many different aspects of wellness for so long prior to Goop, but that's what's received the most press in the past, 5+ years.
100%. And Goop has changed a lot too. I mean, we're kind of talking about height of Goop, right? Where again, totally inaccessible, totally aspirational, very white, very wealthy, very privileged. That is what wellness is. And this whole sort of like chain of spiraling, if you will, kind of like brought us back to like, wait, how did we even get to this point? Because you and I have both been working in this world or adjacent to the world of capital W wellness for a long time. And we've seen it shift and change. And I think we kind of like traced it back to the beginning of basically like when Obama got elected into office, when Occupy Wall Street was happening, and sort of the socioeconomic shifts that were happening globally, but also especially in the United States, and how that really pushed a lot of people to look for something more.
Well, and also a perfect storm in a way for VC funding and a big influx of money to be kind of injected into this quote unquote industry. So things that were not industrialized before started to become much more prevalent. Like even Moon Juice, I think, was one of the first places, I know not compared to like our health food store, but one of the first popular brands to really commodify herbs in the way that they have, whether it's Super You, Super Hair, just brand it in a way that health food stores were not branding it.
Yes, exactly. So, not patchouli scented. It's like something like beautiful gradients.
Yes. To your point, at that time, I think there was also an awakening of, or for some people, for a lot of us, an awakening of, oh yeah, I am responsible for my well-being because I don't have that support. And without that support, it's kind of up to me. And it's this emphasis on the individual. And as a result, that means you have to buy this wellness and health as an individual through all of these products and services. So kind of a perfect storm to capitalize on a few things. One, a healthcare crisis. Two, I think a meaning crisis. And that's kind of a longer story, maybe a podcast for a different day, but thinking about becoming a more secularized society and really struggling to find meaning in a lot of the different communities that we're invested in, especially if we're working so much and we don't have time to be in the communities that we want to be in. And so kind of many different aspects of this, including the recession in 2008, combining to be a perfect storm. Also with the internet, social media.
Yeah, so much has shifted. And if you think about it almost like as a bell curve or a bell graph, like starting in 2008 with, the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act that George W. Bush signed into law that caused this $700 billion bailout, which sort of triggered the recession that we're familiar with, that we're looking back on now of like, ooh, we might be going through something similar. From that point to the sort of height of wellness, this $3.3 trillion and billion-dollar industry, to where we are now of like, oh wait, Moon Juice is going from like super bougie to almost like Amazon basic with their new cookbook. And Goop went from green juice shilling, luxury brand to like now kind of a sex toy store. Like,
not mad.
Not mad about that. No, but like, what does that mean for wellness? Is wellness even real? Or was it this thing that we kind of like co-opted? Yeah, because we were searching for meaning, because we're sort of like grasping at straws. And I think something that we're seeing that's similar is around the time of 2008, wealth as like, and sort of like bouginess and performative wealth. Like think about the beginning of the Real Housewives franchises. Those happened around that time, became really, really popular and important. People were just like desperately trying to hold on to anything that could sort of like throw off the impending financial crisis that would hopefully help us not be impacted by it. But of course, like it would. And trashy luxury was like the very dominant theme of that in that time in 2008. Think about it. Like that's when Lost was the #1 TV show on air, and Jersey Shore and Teen Mom were like in development at MTV. The Hills had just premiered. Like this sort of glitzy, glamorous, but also still kind of like seedy version of was what we were sort of like clinging onto. And Paris Hilton, Lancome Juicy Tubes, you know, like Daisy by Marc Jacobs was like the scent of that moment. And I think that the wellness world, as it sort of sprang up, this sort of like earth mama, no bra wearing, but still like living in a gorgeous place in Venice, and the rise of Instagram was a direct response to that sort of like trashy luxury aesthetic. And in a way, we're kind of like rebounding from Earth Mama or Silver Lake Shaman back to
Prairie Cottage for
exactly. And like Night Lux aesthetic is coming back into vogue. Like this trashy luxury, Juicy's coming back, Uggs are coming back. All of the things that we were, I don't know, wearing in high school are like coming back into style. And to your point, this sort of like dearth or this lack of spirituality and like trust in the world and looking for something to worship, I think that wellness like kind of quickly became something that we could worship in a way alongside capitalism. And wellness, the flavor of wellness that was really popular from, let's say, like 2010 to maybe 2017, this sort of like wake up early, run 5 miles, hustle, make your green juices, like work, biohacking, all of that. I think it was in a response to this, like the Great Recession, where there were less jobs for us to have, but more bills for us to pay, especially as people who are graduating from college or entering the working world. Like hustle culture wasn't a choice. It was like a way that the only way to survive. Like you had to have 4 jobs in order to like pay your bills.
Well, similar to what we were talking about with Danielle last week, the idea that you could, ascend through your morning routine.
Yeah.
You could pull yourself up by your bootstraps through your, healthy eating and fill in the blank routine, bedtime routine, morning routine, whatever. And not to say that those things don't have value. They do, of course, but in the extreme kind of, if you're not well and you're not healthy, it's kind of your fault, was the very subtle messaging of a lot of the content out there. And I think that was subconscious for most people. And I think that really changed like very early in the pandemic, even though that was not always true for a lot of people. I think for the people that were following that, even subconsciously, there was a reminder of, no, like that's not going to save you if you don't have any health care, if you don't have access to basically things that will meet your basic needs.
Yeah, the narrative sort of, the popular narrative that I think a lot of us grew up with, who also came into, like had a coming of age when content creation became democratized because of tools and apps and technology, phones, hardware, software, that made it so easy to make content for very affordably. The sort of narrative that we've grown up with is, if you just work hard enough, you'll be fine. Like if you work hard, you show up, you're going to make enough money. That's like how it works, because that had been how it worked. But again, we like came of age during the $700 billion bailout of our banks. Like everything was broken. We had a mass failure in our economic system. So all those rules that had applied before didn't really apply to us, but we were almost like no one knew what the answer was. So I felt like we were in a little bit of an echo chamber of like young people telling other young people, this is the way to do things. This is the way to like make it happen, making content around that. So regurgitating that message and sharing it over and over again and getting virality because of it. Like, I think about all the like Pinterest and Instagram quotes of like single, busy, building my empire, things like that.
Yeah, totally. Well, because it is both of those things, right? Like it has been and continues to be, to your point, a huge democratization of voice, of ability to have a platform that to a certain extent you control. But it's at the same time was also a result of there aren't many jobs. So you need to kind of figure it out yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And this content, like hustle culture content, and also, I would say wellness content where they sort of converge is here's the pathway to success. Here's the formula to be successful. Literally, here's a smoothie formula that you can make that's going to help you lose weight, or that's going to help you feel energized, or that's going to make your skin glow. But also, like, subtly, what I'm telling you is if you do this, you will be like me. And that's really what Instagram and social media, like, we see that still, right? If, like, basically beautiful people, influencers, the rise of wellness influencers are saying, if you do these things, the subtext is you will look and be like me. Your life will be like mine. And when the sort of pathway, the traditional pathway to success has been obliterated because we were living in a whole new world, that seems like a viable option for people from like both the hustle culture perspective, but also from like the sort of wellness, health is wealth, health and wealth equal happiness perspective too.
And to a certain degree, health is wealth here. When if you can't afford healthcare, you might be in debt for going to the hospital for, you know, fill in the blank reason. So as much as that was the message, like that is the message also.
Yeah, totally.
Because, you know, and there have been fluctuations in terms of what it means to have healthcare here, and it changes per state, of course, as we know now with what we're going through with access to abortion. But I think there's this thinking about the explosion of the lifestyle blogger, and that the majority of the lifestyle blogger influencer content creator is generated around teaching you how to live their lifestyle, but how they actually afford that lifestyle usually is a question mark. And I think there's much more transparency around that now. But I think even when it comes to launching a business, sometimes people have capital that is coming from family or another business, or sure, it could be an investment, but we're not always aware of how these things, we're not always aware or have the time or maybe totally the interest. So there's a lot of subtleties that are communicated through being like, here, this is how I live my day. This is what my day looks like, you know, in Malibu or whatever.
Right.
And because social media is, or certain platforms are so one directional, and we can't help but project and make assumptions. So I think there has been that backlash, as we've seen over the past few years, towards this type of lifestyle influencer.
Yeah. And I think we've seen like a lot of those wellness influencers who just like soared in popularity during the 2012 to 2017 time, even up to 2019, pre-pandemic. We've seen a lot of them fall, like either go to rehab or admit that they have an eating disorder, or like that they're not happy, or that they need to be medicated for depression, which none of those things are bad. They're real. It's like, that's human. But the facade that had been created on social media of, well, my life is perfect because I'm healthy, because I drink my green juice every day and I do my 15-minute meditation in my journal, and I write down my affirmations in different colored pencils at the beginning of every month during the new moon. Like, that's not going to make your life perfect. And sort of cracking that open and seeing that, I think, has made a lot of people question, like, well, what even is this really, what's really this thing that people were trying to sell me? And that is, like, I think where wellness gets a bad rap, or the past version of wellness gets a bad rap. And to your point about, health is wealth, when you think about hustle culture and the rise of hustle culture, in 2010, President Obama signed into effect the Affordable Care Act, and that gave people under the age of 26 access to their parents' health care until they were 26. But before that, we didn't have insurance. Like you didn't have insurance once you turned 18. Combine that with a lack of jobs, like full-time jobs that could give you access to healthcare, because in this country, you have to be a quote unquote productive working member of society in order to earn healthcare, which is fucking whack. And the rise of like these freelance jobs that don't give you access, number one, don't often pay you enough, but also don't give you access to healthcare. It really did become something that you had to take care of for yourself, or trade your happiness working at maybe a corporate job at a really low paying gig, because that's what you can get, for being able to, I don't know, afford going to the doctor and the dentist. And wellness being a escape hatch, or maybe this is the way that I can get as much as I want, that I can have it all, that I can have these artistic and creative jobs or have a couple of things that I work on and still like get away with not having healthcare, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's also an empowerment too in that. In if I can control my schedule, I can control my routines, and maybe I can be healthier and be okay not going, to see a regular, I was about to say pediatrician, but I think that is the flip side too, is understanding that, allopathic and Western medicine has a lot of stuff, figured out, but a lot of stuff not figured out. And that even when you're buying into that system, you're going out of pocket for so many of these other resources that you want. So then the question is, do I even want to pay into that system? Is that even worth it for me if I can kind of take this control in my life or have this control in my life over my schedule, my time, and then buy into the resources that I think actually help me?
Yeah. A really quick personal story. I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was 17, and obviously right before I turned 18, and I was put on this medication that was really expensive. It was like $250 a pill, and I'd take, and I would take 2 pills a day. And I was supposed to take that medication every day for the rest of my life, which is what my neurologist told me. And so I started like doing that quick math as someone who wanted to be a professional artist. I was like, I'm never going to be able to afford, I won't get healthcare as a dancer. Like I won't. I know that that's probably not something I'm going to be able to do. So I'm going to have to figure that out. And I can't pay for this thing out of pocket. That's insane. So I'm either going to have to marry someone who can like get me healthcare, or I'm going to have to not do this job that I love, that I'm passionate about, that I've dedicated my young life to up until this point. Or I'm going to have to figure out this other solution that can help me like literally live and function. And that felt like the most reasonable option for me at that point in my life. Like, I guess I'll just go and try all this crazy stuff and see what works. And it actually did end up working for me, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. And I know like you've had health issues or in the past too, that have taken you've looked beyond allopathic medicine to try and find support or help for them.
Absolutely. I feel like I've tried almost everything except for bee stinging. I don't know if that's still a trend, but I felt like I was seeing a lot of people doing that at a certain point, and I was like, okay, I don't know. I think we need to save the bees.
That might be my boundary.
I think the bees are responsible for a lot of humans and crops staying alive. I don't think we should be killing them by stinging ourselves every day. But hey, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
But I'm very much, I'll try anything once.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not twice, especially colonics, little side tangent. But yeah, I think that's just kind of my personality too. I have so much curiosity around, new things. And that's one of the things that got me into this space, because I feel like there is always kind of a new innovation that is being marketed to you to solve something that you're like, yeah, I have that issue, which is, I don't know, on the one hand, it's just interesting and fun to explore not only your body, but your spirituality or your mental health. It's kind of in a way been just a way to get to know myself, also like a vehicle to do that. So there are things that I probably do throughout my days and weeks that have come from, one of these modalities that I've tried that I don't even think about anymore.
Yeah.
But I definitely have gone through my own journey of disillusionment with this industry, of just being like, this is insane. I remember when I was first in high school dealing with like a lot of acid reflux and digestive stuff, and I was getting into, I don't remember her name, but there was like a raw food person that I was into. And you go through various people who recommend different things. But I remember going to the health food store with my mom and being like, okay, here are all the supplements that I need. Will you like buy these for me for my health? And my mom being like, what the fuck? Like, what is this shit?
Yeah.
Like just reading the labels and being
like
like
raw psyllium husk. She's like, what's
Yeah.
going on here?
Yeah, and she's like, this is like $56 and you have like 10 of these. What, like,
Yeah.
and just, so I think even that first initiation was like, whoa, this is an expensive habit, is what my mom called it at the time. And I was like, it's not a habit, it's a way to live.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, just growing up and being responsible for your own bills, you're like, yeah, this is not affordable.
No.
As a way to live for the most part in terms of all of your access to health being out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that becoming another, I mean, a question that I ask a lot of myself and with Ethan, because Ethan takes a lot of supplements too for his well-being and for his health, is how much of this is placebo? How much of this is because I believe it? And I think you touched on something about like the dearth of spirituality and religion in our society right now. I mean, we're not really, in a way, for people who are, I would say like left-leaning politically. Yeah. We're not necessarily like, we're a more secular society. And the sort of like faith that comes with investing in wellness a lot of the time, what we call wellness, and also like the fact that we crave that as humans. We crave something to believe in, something to worship, something to like sort of be the centerpiece and our meaning making system in the world, something that helps us make sense of like why we're feeling the way that we feel. And I think a lot of times when your health is like, when nothing makes sense, when nothing feels fair, when it's your health that's questioned or just like your reason for existing, it's intoxicating to find something that could be an answer or to keep looking for potential answers and maybe keep finding them. And I think that's where like the mystical part of the wellness space started to blow up too, because at least from my entry point into wellness, it was much more like facilitating health. And then it was like, but your health is connected to like this mystical part or this like this thing that you had in a past life or whatever it might be. And that got me like even further down the rabbit hole.
Totally. Well, and I think that is a lot of people who are interested, whether it's health as the entry point or if it's more spirituality. You know, you're probably a seeker. You're probably someone who's innately very curious, or maybe you're lacking community in your life at home and you're looking to connect elsewhere, or you're disillusioned with the kind of capitalistic world that is sold to us as our, you know,
with
place
good
to find
reason.
meaning.
There's not a lot of reason and meaning there.
Exactly. Even thinking of a lot of people's introduction to wellness is mindfulness and meditation, and how common it is now to speak about meditation when 5-10 years ago it was not at all. People would be like, I don't, no way. And now people are like, yeah, you know, I dabble. Like
there's
generally.
meditation rooms at your co-working space. That's not a weird thing. And I think that also touches on sort of like spirituality and wellness as this, again, biohacking way or hack to productivity and the intrinsic connection between wellness and capitalism, because we live in a capitalistic society of like, well, I want to be well so I can go to work. I can
work better.
Exactly. I don't want to have brain fog because I want to be able to work better. Exactly. And make more money and be smarter than the other people in my meeting or whatever. That's like the subtle thing that's also sold to us too through the wellness world. I think a lot of the time, especially now.
Yeah. We were just talking about this before the recording, but hybrid work environments, working at home, what has working from home given a lot of people taken away, blah, blah, blah. But it's all usually within the frame of how do we get people to be the most optimal that they can be.
Exactly.
So always through that lens, because ultimately that's still what we're working with here.
Right. And I think that's something that like we try to hammer home as much as possible at Holisticism, because we also like, it's easy to get caught up in that, right? If that's what everyone's talking about. And what we try to hammer home at Holisticism is like, it's not about optimization so that you can do more work and make more money. It's about self-actualization. You want to be like, feel like the best version of yourself, because the reason we're here, we believe, is to like experiment and experience. And if you're distracted by all this other stuff, like, are you going to wake up when you're 75 years old, 80 and be like, oh fuck, I missed the whole ride. Like that wasn't why I chose this body to be in. Like I'm here to live and to feel things and experience things as a spiritual being in a human vessel. And am I getting distracted by the stuff that doesn't really matter or that isn't really going to matter or that's maybe holding me back from being able to see that and connect to that spirit?
Yeah. And to that point, something we've been talking a lot about is doing your sacred work. And what does that mean to do your sacred work? And that is different for everyone. And even throughout your personal lifetime, you have many different iterations of what that looks like. Maybe one day it's child rearing. Maybe one day it's making your art. It's running your business, or it's taking care of another family member, or it's just traveling, whatever that is for you. And one thing that I think really stuck out through all of these conversations that we've had about this is it's one thing to be working in the wellness industry and doing your sacred, but then to be able to step back and say, oh, am I caught up in participating in this because I think this is what I should be doing, not because this is actually what is calling me truly to my sacred work.
Yeah, totally. And I think we could replace wellness with anything, with any word, right? Exactly. Depending on what you're most interested in. It's easy to get caught up in the hype of it all and in the race of it and the rat race
or just to your point, what everyone else around you is talking about or doing. Like the amount of times that I've had to be like recently, wait, do I want kids? Do I want kids at all? Or do I want them right now?
Right.
And pull back and be like, is this what I think I should want?
Yeah.
Because so many people around me are engaged in it. And where's the truth of what I want and how do I let that percolate and come up versus being just distracted by what everyone else is doing around me?
Totally. I feel that so much as a business owner. For example, we were just at an event, an LA Tech Week event this week, and I could feel myself getting pulled back into the hustle. How much money have you raised? Blah, blah, blah. And there's almost one half of my body that's just this makes me want to poke my own eyes out. I hate this so much. I don't like anything about this. This is not who I am. And this doesn't matter to me. And the other side of me feeling so small, does what I do even matter? Are these people better than me? And is this what should matter? Have I been focusing on the wrong thing this whole time? And I totally know that that's not true, but that tide or that energy, you can get sucked into it so easily, even when you know yourself so clearly. And I think wellness can feel that way too, because it can be distracting, right? And it can be a way to hide disordered thinking very easily as well.
Because it's under the guise of the wellness watchdog. And it's almost like whatever that is for you changes according to your experiences in life. But I feel for me, the wellness watchdog is that disordered orthorexic place of you're eating too much of XYZ. So that's probably why you're not sleeping well.
Right.
Or you're not meditating or writing your gratitude list before bed. So
right. You're not passing your tests. Which is why you're not manifesting your thing. It's
oh, there you go.
Actually, I don't. And we're not even getting into the socioeconomic and racial and sexism implications that are sort of rife throughout the wellness space. Not implications, but the issues and the lack of social justice work that was so rampant within the wellness space. And it's just now starting, I think, over the last couple of years to enter the space in a more thoughtful and conscientious way. But it does make you wonder, is the wellness industry just the way that it's set up? Does it even make space for those types of conversations? Sort of capital W, capital I wellness industry, this $3.3 trillion industry.
I was just thinking when you were saying that about all of the community organizers and social justice workers who have been doing this work for so long and look at the wellness industry as, oh yeah, it's just another part of consumerism that is totally different than what we're doing, because what we're doing takes organizing on a level that doesn't have a lot of very quick returns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because that's how capitalism functions, there's not a lot of space for these more complex, nuanced conversations that are not built on exponential growth year over year, that community organizing and social justice work is more of that like meandering, nonlinear spiral work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like rhizomatic work in a way, like that it's all building upon itself and everyone's contributing in some way. Yeah, and when you say that, it makes me think, like immediately in my head, I saw Split, like the future of wellness. And I think that's what we're kind of like coming around to, right? Is our original question was, is wellness even real? Like, was it just this sort of pseudo industry that was created by brands, by companies, by venture-backed businesses that had millions of dollars to throw at marketing and sort of create a category that hadn't really existed before, which is sort of fake, like a fake need? Or is it something that we legitimately want and need and want to continue to build and contribute to? And I think we're going to see a deepening fissure between those two spaces. And I wonder if we're going to eventually have different words to describe them. And I think that's what we're going to see over time, because even the word wellness doesn't feel big enough to encompass what it is. Let's say, like, I don't necessarily feel part of the wellness world, but I know that we're part of the wellness world.
Yeah, and I think one of the positive things that's come out of all of this kind of conversation during the pandemic has been, what does that mean to you?
To piggyback on it, I think we're realizing that, like, oh, wait, fuck, everything contributes to our wellness. If we're going to use the word wellness or well-being to describe like how we exist in the world, we also have to acknowledge that like everything contributes to our well-being. I think we talk about that a lot at Holisticism. That's like why we came up with the word Holisticism, right? From like, of course, the obvious things, the sort of like eye roll, that's wellness, like food, drink, exercise, mindset. But also there are a lot of things that contribute to that, like how much money I make and my financial health. So that makes a difference in my well-being. So couldn't work like what Chantel Chapman at Trauma of Money does. Well, wouldn't that be considered wellness too? Or like the financial feminist, isn't that wellness? Like in a way, isn't political work wellness too? And that's not a new idea. We know that that's not new, but even how I relate to my job. What about how I talk to my boss? What about how I raise my children or how I talk to my parent? Isn't all of that contribute to my well-being too? So isn't everything we do, including like the media we take in, the movies we see, the books we read, isn't that wellness as well? So is everything wellness?
I think even over the past 2 years, we've seen an increase in conversation around media literacy as being part of that pie of mental health, and how there's such a lacking of that in our society, and that's presenting a lot of clear issues right now.
Cute.
And that is, there you go.
Which, like, you're like, that's okay. You're mentally ill,
Yeah, and that like people are so vulnerable to be then in a position where they're vulnerable to things that not.
Yeah, or I've been watching a lot of the Teal Swan conversation that's happening, and she's someone who I'll let you do your own research on if you're listening to this, but uses Google's SEO, Google's algorithm to basically get people who are searching for suicide, like have suicidal ideations, to get them on her YouTube channel and basically get them into her funnel. And she's this quote unquote spiritual teacher. And just like thinking about that very high level perspective. Yeah. Media literacy, the internet, algorithms, and mental health, access to mental health care. All three of those things are contributing to, or four of those things are contributing to the well-being of that person's wellness in that situation. So we almost can't divorce wellness as its own category, at least for me in a way. Like I feel like the idea of wellness is dead. This separate thing. Everything is wellness. Yeah. And I'm really craving a new word to describe that. Maybe, hopefully nodding your head along to some of this. And maybe you also feel like, oh my God, where do I even start? And how do I feel almost overwhelmed because I'm like, maybe we're just trying to do too much. Maybe everything, saying everything is wellness is just not even helpful. Yeah. Or yeah, true. Yes. And like, maybe you still need to pick a lane. And I think that we're going to enter a space, especially as we enter the recession, where people who were would consider themselves squarely in the wellness world are going to defect from the wellness world, but they're going to have sort of that idea of wellness and holistic existence as like a key pillar or a key value in what they do. And I'm excited to see how that manifests in lots of small businesses and hopefully big businesses in the future.
Likewise. And this is not to condemn the space, of course. Hopefully that's come across. I think we're at an exciting inflection point of this understanding that you can have somebody be a stylist who is looking at your wardrobe from a perspective of holism or holisticism lens, where they're like, I'm going to help you self-actualize through feeling more comfortable in your clothing and knowing how to shop for your body type and feeling better every day when you show up, wherever you need to show up.
Yeah.
I think what's really cool is we have so many examples of that personally within the community. I have learned from so many people who have been just creative geniuses with how they're approaching this. I feel inspired that hopefully this is a more integrated approach.
Yeah. I wonder if maybe the term, like you just said, two good ones, if it's self-actualization or if it's like integration. I wonder if we're going to be talking about the integration industry in the future or the self-actualization industry and like where we'll all fall on that spectrum or category, or how this category is going to grow and become more important as we do enter this potential global depression, depending on what happens with China, because that's really intense. But I'm excited. I also think that this is cool. Like these different factions that are coming out of the wellness space and the evolution of it. It's sad to see some things fall by the wayside, only some things, but it's exciting to see a lot of our old paradigms sort of be shifted and shaken up.
Mic drop. So that was our process.
Yeah.
And our thesis and our discussion all in one.
Yeah. And on this podcast, you'll hear some of the things that we're talking about here reflected in the content that's going to be coming up, and really comparing notes and seeing and empathizing and understanding like how to be holistic, how to be well from all these different perspectives and how different people do it and how it's changing all the time, constantly. And hopefully that gives you permission and a little bit of inspiration to find what works for you, not just what some expert on the internet tells you to do.
And we would also love to hear from you what you think of this topic. We're going to link in the show notes a place to send in voice notes. You can also reply to the weekly email, which if you're not subscribed to, we'll put the link below because also great email. It's kind of a recap of the podcast plus all the tools that we're looking at each week that we're trying, great links, good articles, some good quotes. It's good mail. But we'd love to hear what you think of this whole idea that we presented, but also just what wellness means to you now, what aspects of this industry you're really excited to see as part of a bygone era, and what you're looking forward to, if you have a different paradigm that we haven't talked about, because I'm sure we missed a lot. So thank you so much for listening.
And if you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. It helps us get found by other people. It makes a huge difference for us in our morale.
Yes, please. You can just hit 5 stars. You could leave a review, but even just 5 stars. And share it with a friend that you think might be, interested in this topic or, curious about where things are going to go next.
Yeah. Go ahead. If you don't already subscribe to the podcast, make sure that you do, so you get all of the new episodes that are coming out and some of our Inside Voice episodes that are going to be on the feed in the future.
Yes. In case you're like, what's that? It's monthly and it's part of our private feed, and it's kind of just a little bit more inside baseball, personal stuff. We released an episode in August on the feed, and it'll be private next month and onward. And we'll be talking about maternity leave, pregnancy, that kind of stuff next. And so it's just a little bit more personal, and also a way to support us and make better content for you guys, because we make it for you.
Everything we do for you. We love you so much. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the internet.
Bye.
Bye.